AITA for taking my mom's bribe money and ghosting after my brother impregnated my fiancée. 3 years ago, I was engaged to a woman. Let's call her Ava. At the time, I truly believed she was the person I was going to marry. Ava and I had been together for almost 5 years, and our relationship seemed solid. We were both corporate lawyers, which meant we led demanding, hectic lives, but we always made sure to make time for each other whenever we could. The year I proposed to Ava was supposed to be the best year of our lives. But that same year, something unexpected happened. She lost her job. This occurred after it was discovered she had breached some serious company policies. I won't go into the details, but the firm terminated her contract immediately, and the dismissal was harsh. If you've ever known a workaholic perfectionist, you can understand how devastating such a loss can be. Her work wasn't just a job to Ava. It was a part of her identity, her pride, and her purpose. Losing it so suddenly completely shattered her. Ava immediately dove into her job search, sending out applications to numerous firms and corporate legal departments. Unfortunately, her experience was very specialized, and opportunities weren't easy to find, especially given the circumstances of her departure. Months went by, and she still hadn't secured a new position. Throughout this time, I tried to be as present and supportive as possible. I assured her she didn't have to worry about our finances. After all, we were engaged, and I considered it my duty to take care of her during this difficult period. Knowing Ava had a tendency to obsess and stress out, I encouraged her to relax and not let the situation consume her. To my relief, she took my advice, or at least she tried to. With all her free time, she decided to pursue a dream she had always had, learning landscape design. She enrolled in a course at the local community college and began dedicating her free hours to it. Coincidentally, it was the same landscaping course my brother Caleb was taking. Let me tell you a bit about Caleb. He's my exact opposite. While I was the responsible one in the family, focused on my studies and building a career, Caleb was the carefree one. He spent his high school years getting into trouble and building a reputation for being charming but unreliable with women. This reputation followed him through a brief stint in college and long after. Caleb was the type to never stay with one person for long and never take anything seriously. Ava had met him early in our relationship and knew exactly what kind of person he was. So, when she started taking the same class as Caleb, I thought their meeting was purely coincidental. But looking back, that's where everything started to change. As the weeks went by, they became surprisingly close. At first, I didn't worry about it. Caleb would sometimes offer to give her a ride home from class, which I thought was thoughtful, though a bit out of character for him. Ava would come home excited, telling me stories about what she and Caleb had done in class or showing me pictures of their design projects. But then, their interactions moved beyond the classroom. They started spending time together on weekends, visiting farmers markets, or trying new brunch spots. These were activities Ava and I used to do together, but now she was sharing them with Caleb instead. Gradually, I noticed other changes. She was spending far more time with Caleb than I thought was normal, and it was starting to affect our relationship. She even began to cancel our date nights to go out with him. I'm not the type to keep my doubts to myself, so one evening, I confronted her directly. I asked her frankly if there was something going on between her and Caleb. Ava was shocked by my question, almost offended. She flatly denied that anything inappropriate was happening and insisted their relationship was purely platonic. She explained that spending time with him was fun and lighthearted, like hanging out with a younger brother. She seemed genuinely hurt that I would think otherwise, and for a moment, I felt guilty for doubting her. But deep down, a part of me was never truly convinced. Everything blew up 2 months before our wedding. At that time, I was working relentlessly, shouldering a massive caseload at my firm to ensure our financial stability. Since Ava had lost her job, I had taken on all the household bills and wedding expenses. She still hadn't found work, and although she used some of her savings for personal needs, I was carrying most of the financial weight. Between the stress of the expenses and planning the wedding, my days at the office were long and exhausting. I wasn't as present as I would have liked to be, and in retrospect, that may have given Ava and Caleb the opportunity to get closer. One evening, I came home earlier than expected from a business trip. I was excited to surprise Ava and spend some time with her. As I pulled into the driveway, I immediately noticed Caleb's car, a slightly beat-up Ford Mustang, parked out front. Ordinarily, This wouldn't have alarmed me, as Caleb had a habit of showing up unannounced, but this time was different. It was after 9 p.m., and seeing his car at our house at that hour was a major red flag. The living room was empty, but the TV was on. My eyes fell on beer cans littering the coffee table, and then on something undeniable: Ava's lingerie carelessly discarded on the floor. I knew, in that exact moment, what I was about to find. A part of me wanted to turn around and leave, but another part, the one that needed irrefutable proof, pushed me forward. I had to see it with my own eyes. I walked slowly toward the master bedroom and stopped at the door. There they were, Ava and Caleb, together in our bed. They were so absorbed in each other they didn't even notice me standing there. Normally, I'm a calm and composed person, but this was an absolute betrayal. Without a word, I walked into the room. I grabbed Caleb by the shoulder and pulled him away from Ava. The shock on his face was almost satisfying. He turned his head toward me, and his expression shifted from confusion to pure terror. I gave him no chance. I lost my composure and struck him hard across the face. The impact sent a jolt up my arm. As he stumbled back, he cried out, but I didn't care. I hit him again, my anger fueling every blow. Blood started to pour from his nose, staining the collar of his shirt. He staggered backward, his hands weakly trying to shield his face, but I kept going. Once he was on the floor, hurt and pleading for me to stop, I turned my attention to Ava. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, trembling and in tears. I looked her straight in the eye and told her she had 10 minutes to get her things and get out of my house. I warned her that if she wasn't gone by then, I wouldn't be responsible for what happened next. She started begging me, apologizing over and over. She said she could explain and pleaded with me not to kick her out, that she deserved a chance to explain herself. But I wasn't interested in her excuses. I glanced at my watch and said coldly, "You have 9 minutes left." The tone of my voice and my expression must have made her realize I was serious, because she scrambled out of bed and began to get dressed with trembling hands. Tears streamed down her face as she grabbed a suitcase from the closet and started throwing whatever she could reach into it. When she was done, dragging her half-filled suitcase down the stairs, she turned to me one last time. Her voice was broken as she begged me to listen, claiming she loved me and deserved a chance to explain. Without a word, I took her hand, pulled the engagement ring off her finger, and pushed her toward the front door. She tried to resist, but I had had enough. I opened the door and forced her out into the night. She stumbled on the porch, still crying and screaming for me to forgive her. I didn't even look back as I slammed the door behind her. Caleb was still on the floor, and although I was still seething with rage, I knew I needed to handle the situation responsibly. I called my parents and told them everything. My father was furious with Caleb, and my mother was in shock, but they both said they would come over immediately. When they arrived, my mother, who is a registered nurse, tended to Caleb's injuries. She cleaned him up and confirmed his nose was likely broken. Meanwhile, my father took me out to the backyard, away from Caleb. He could see my hands were still shaking with anger and that I was barely holding myself together. A little later, Caleb came into the yard with my mother. His face was bruised and swollen, and there were still traces of blood on his shirt. He apologized for betraying me, claiming he never wanted things to happen this way. Then, he dropped another bombshell. He said he was in love with Ava. I finally turned to him, my fury reignited. He went on to explain that he believed Ava felt the same way about him. He assured me it was the first time they had been intimate, as if that changed anything. Then, he took out his phone and showed me their text messages, conversations full of suggestive jokes, secrets, and Ava's confessions about her unhappiness in our relationship. According to Caleb, she was the one who had invited him to stay over that night, thinking I was still out of town. Reading those messages, my rage resurfaced. Caleb kept talking, saying he regretted hurting me, but also that he had never felt this way about anyone before. He said he couldn't help himself and begged me to forgive him. My father, who had been listening silently until then, had heard enough. He told Caleb he was lucky I hadn't done worse. But my mother's reaction was different. Caleb had always been her favorite, and I could see she was struggling to process the situation. My mother started saying that, whatever I decided to do about Ava, I had to forgive my brother. She said he seemed truly remorseful and that two brothers shouldn't let a woman come between them. She even offered to give me money to cover the wedding vendor deposits I had lost, But when I told her I was willing to accept her check, but not to reconcile with Caleb, she withdrew her offer. I cut her off and told my parents I didn't want to hear any sermons or advice. All I wanted at that moment was for them to take Caleb and leave. I couldn't stand to look at him anymore. My father nodded, understanding I needed space, and helped Caleb into their car. My mother hesitated, clearly wanting to stay and smooth things over, but she eventually followed them. In the weeks that followed, I was still dealing with the fallout. Ava bombarded me with messages, begging for my forgiveness and trying to explain herself. But her justifications always revolved around the same excuses, very similar to Caleb's. She claimed she never meant for this to happen. I ignored her completely. Then, out of the blue, I got a call from Caleb. He announced that Ava had just found out she was pregnant and that the baby was his. He said that since she was carrying his child, he wanted to marry her and get my blessing, which I absolutely did not give. My mother's reaction only made things worse. She had already tried to play mediator between Caleb and me, but now she seemed to see Ava's pregnancy as some kind of divine intervention. She said it was like destiny had planned for Ava to get pregnant this way, and that maybe Caleb and Ava were meant to be together. It was as if she was trying to justify the unjustifiable, to excuse what they had done because of this pregnancy. That's when I told my mother I knew exactly what she was doing, and if she decided to side with Caleb and Ava, our relationship would be over. I wasn't joking. My brother's betrayal was bad enough, but seeing my own mother defend them was something I couldn't accept. My father tried to remain neutral, perhaps thinking it would help calm the situation. Regardless, my mother offered financial support to Ava, assuring her that she and the baby would be well taken care of. But of course, there was a condition. My mother insisted that Caleb and Ava get married. After all, that's what Caleb wanted too. My mother was relentless in this quest, refusing to imagine her grandchild being born outside of a marriage. When I learned that Caleb and Ava were indeed getting married and had started sending invitations to family members, I felt a deep sense of rage and humiliation. Without further discussion, I simply kept my word and cut ties with my mother and my brother. However, my mother doesn't give up easily. For weeks after our falling out, she called me non-stop, left me voicemails, and even showed up at my apartment unannounced, trying to guilt-trip me into reconciling. It was suffocating. That's when I knew the only way to escape her was to leave town entirely. It's been 3 years since they destroyed my life. I have moved to a new city, cutting ties with almost my entire family except for my father. He respected my decision to leave and understood why I needed the distance, even though it saddened him that I no longer came home for holidays. In 3 years, I've rebuilt my life piece by piece. I didn't share my new number with anyone but my father. I made new friends, found some semblance of normalcy, and worked hard to leave the past behind me. So, imagine my surprise when, yesterday, I found Ava on my doorstep, ringing my doorbell. When I opened the door, I almost didn't recognize her. Ava looked nothing like the woman I had once loved. She looked tired and worn down, as if she had suffered a great deal during this time. There she was, holding the hand of a little girl who couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 years old. The child had Caleb's distinct eyes and smile, leaving no doubt that he was the father. I wondered, why was she here? How had she found me? What did she want? Finally, I broke the silence. Ava, what are you doing here? She was crying as she begged me to let her in, saying she had something important to tell me. My first instinct was to say no and send her away, but then I looked at the little girl beside her, who was staring at me with her big, innocent eyes. I couldn't be rude in front of the child. So, I stepped aside and motioned for them to come in. I showed them to the couch and offered them some water. Once they were settled, I sat across from her and asked again, "What are you doing here?" I already knew she couldn't have found me on her own. I had only given my new address to my father, and I trusted him to keep it private unless there was a true emergency. So, what was so important that he would give her my address instead of calling me himself? Ava took an envelope out of her purse. She handed it to me without a word. I opened it and immediately recognized my mother's handwriting. My mother had written bluntly that it was my responsibility to fix the mess Caleb had created. She explained how Ava and Josie were in trouble, how Caleb had abandoned them, and how, as Caleb's brother and Josie's uncle, I had to help them. She argued that since Ava had almost been my wife and the child was my niece, it was my duty. I looked at Ava, confused and angry. What is this supposed to mean? I asked her. That's when Ava burst into tears and told me the whole story. According to her, Caleb had been unfaithful from the very beginning of their marriage. Even after their daughter Josie was born, my brother had continued to have affairs. For her part, Ava had tried to make their relationship work, hoping things would get better with time, if only for Josie's sake. But 3 months ago, Caleb suddenly packed a bag and left without an explanation, without a word, without a warning. He just disappeared. Since then, Ava had been on her own. She had no job, no savings, and was about to lose her home. She and Caleb had been living in a rental house, and without his income, she could no longer afford the rent. My mother, feeling obligated to help because of Josie, had been giving her money to support them. But now that Caleb was gone, my mother had decided she no longer wanted to be financially responsible for Ava and her child. Ava then explained that my mother wanted me to take them in, as she had nowhere to go and no one else to turn to. I was completely disgusted by her request and by the absurdity of the situation. Not only had my mother sided with Caleb during the initial betrayal, but now she was trying to make me bear the consequences of his actions. Her blatant favoritism toward Caleb was on full display again. I immediately told Ava, quite bluntly, that she had no right to expect any help from me. This was not my child, she was no longer my fiancée, and this was certainly not my responsibility. While I was sorry Caleb had abandoned her, she should have seen it coming. After all, he wasn't exactly known for his loyalty or sense of duty. I was not going to be manipulated into fixing their mess. So, I asked Ava to leave. She started crying, saying she had nowhere to go, no money, and that what little cash she had left, she had spent on gas to drive to my city. I ended up giving her just enough money for a full tank of gas before asking her to leave again. That's my story about my mother and her favoritism. I recently found an online forum about parents who favor one child, and it seemed like the right place to share my experience. Update 1. I want to clarify a few things. My mother's behavior in this situation completely baffles me. The fact that she's trying to guilt-trip me into helping Ava and her child after everything that's happened seems incredibly selfish. I can understand her feeling obligated to help her granddaughter, but she shouldn't expect me to clean up the mess left by her favorite child, especially after how she handled the initial situation. If my mother wants to have a favorite, then she should own her choice and deal with the fallout herself. I agree with some of the comments saying that my father also betrayed my trust. Instead of supporting me, he chose to remain neutral. Even though he confronted my brother once, he never truly took my side by standing up to my mother's manipulative behavior. He played a part in this as well. I plan on having a conversation with him soon. Yes, Caleb abandoned Ava, but that doesn't automatically make me her savior. She made her choices, and while I have compassion for her situation as a single mother, I don't owe her anything. The fact that she showed up at my door with nothing but a sob story and a child only highlights her desperation. I didn't send her away out of revenge. I was simply making it clear that it wasn't my job to fix what Caleb had broken. I am not obligated to take care of her. No, this child is definitely not mine. Ava and I had broken up weeks before she could have conceived, and by that point, it had already been some time since we had been intimate. The timeline is clear, and there is absolutely no chance I am the father. There is no need for a paternity test or anything else. Besides, Josie is the spitting image of Caleb, his face, his eyes, his smile. It's like seeing a miniature version of him. I have no doubt that Caleb is her father. The resemblance is undeniable. No, I do not want to adopt my niece. I can't believe some of you are even suggesting this. Regardless of Ava's financial or emotional situation, it's up to her to take responsibility as a mother. I don't understand why she never went back to work after getting married, nor why she didn't have any savings. Caleb is the father, so even if they are separated, it's up to both of them to provide for their child. Caleb is legally obligated to pay child support. Update 2. I spoke to my parents about this whole situation. I already knew it was my father who gave Ava my address, but I wanted to hear it directly from him. I called him and asked him point blank why he did it when I had specifically asked him not to, and what he expected me to do. My father was silent for a moment. Then he heaved a long sigh and apologized. "I'm sorry, son, I really am," he said. "We did everything we could to help Ava, but with Caleb gone, there was only so much we could do. Your mother begged me to give her your address. She thought if you saw her and Josie, you might be moved to help them. My frustration grew, and I asked him, why would you think I'd want to help her? She betrayed me with my own brother, and now you expect me to just take her in. My father said he understood why I was angry. He explained that neither he nor my mother wanted things to end this way, but that Ava and Josie were family now, and he believed I was their only option. He apologized again, but I was done listening. I told him our relationship was over. I had trusted him to be different from my mother, but it turned out they were both the same. Did he really think I was just going to forget the past and start taking care of them? It's a harsh blow to realize my parents never really cared about my feelings in all of this. I told him firmly to lose my number. I warned him, if he or my mother showed up at my house again, I would call the police and have them removed for trespassing. My father tried to apologize again, begging me to listen, but I was no longer interested. Don't call me again, I said. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine. I hung up before he could say another word and immediately blocked his number. What my father did is unforgivable. Update 3. It's been almost a month since my last update. I finally managed to track down Caleb with the help of a friend who's good with online research. It turns out Ava was right. Caleb is living with his latest girlfriend in a town a few hours away, acting as if he has no responsibilities, no wife, and no child. I'm not surprised. He's always been this way. I can't believe this is the same person who, 3 years ago, looked me straight in the eye and claimed he was in love with Ava, turning my entire life upside down. Ava knew who Caleb was and still chose to get involved with him. So, I have no pity for her. It's like being warned a stove is hot, and you decide to touch it anyway. You're going to get burned. After finding out where he was, I sent the address to Ava. I didn't want to get any more involved, but I also couldn't let an innocent child suffer because of her parents' irresponsibility. I gave her one last piece of advice via email. You need to hire a lawyer and file for divorce and child support. Serve him the papers now before he disappears again. Ava replied, thanking me, and I could sense the relief in her words. She apologized once again, but I was done with her apologies. I texted her back, do not contact me again. Do not come to my house. This is the last thing I will ever do for you. Whatever we had is over. I just wanted her to leave me in peace for good. Update 4. To explain this update, I need to give you some context. My brother never finished college, and since he dropped out, he's been living off temporary, under-the-table jobs. That's why he was taking landscaping classes. The type of work he does means he's never tied down to one place. And if you've read my previous posts, you know where this is going. Yes, my brother moved. Or rather, he ran. Apparently, he got wind that Ava was trying to serve him with divorce and child support papers, and the first thing he did was skip town. That's what Ava found out when she went to his girlfriend's house to have the papers served. He was already gone. His now ex-girlfriend claimed she didn't know where he went, but who knows if that's true. Meanwhile, I learned all of this because Ava emailed me again, asking for help in finding him. I replied that she had once again ignored my request to stop contacting me, so I wouldn't help her. Then my parents showed up at my house. My father tried to apologize again, but I told them both that I wouldn't spend another cent on this situation. I had already lost thousands on a wedding that never happened. That's when my mother said she could pay me back some of the money if I took responsibility for Ava and my niece. I told her that if she was willing to write me a check right then and there, maybe, just maybe, I would take the time to consider whether it was worth my time to decide if I should help Ava. This implied there was a very high chance I wouldn't, but she wanted to be sure that if she wrote a check, she would get a result. I told her it was a gamble on her part. She thought for a moment, then wrote me a check for $5,000. That doesn't even cover a quarter of the wedding costs, but something is better than nothing. Then I told them to leave, because the check didn't include a clause preventing me from calling the police if they trespassed again. They left pretty quickly. I spent a few seconds thinking about whether I should devote my time to considering helping Ava, and after deep and intense reflection, I concluded that I would not. I think it took me longer to deposit the check via my banking app than it did to make that decision. The good news is that the check cleared. I informed my mother by phone, and she was furious. According to her, since I accepted her money, I should keep my promise. But there was no promise. The payment was for me to consider the idea, and I did. For a lawyer, the distinction is everything. Maybe if the check had been for a much larger amount, I would have thought about it for a few more seconds, but the decision would have been the same. It was a bad idea for my mother to try to make a deal with a betrayed lawyer. Update 5. My mother demanded I return the money, but I told her to sue me if she thinks she has any legal standing to do so. There are no text messages, and even if she recorded our conversation, there is no mention of me agreeing to anything concrete in exchange for money. It would be an interesting case to argue in court, not to mention the opportunity for me to file a countersuit for harassment. My brother has resurfaced, and Ava has finally managed to have him served with the court papers. And guess who my brother called, asking to represent him in the divorce? Good luck finding a lawyer who will do the job for free, because it won't be me, and he's broke. And good luck to Ava trying to get any meaningful child support from my brother. If she wanted financial security, she should have picked someone who wasn't a deadbeat. Comment. Hey everyone, reading through this experience really highlights the importance of setting firm boundaries in our lives. Sometimes, walking away from people who repeatedly cross our limits is the healthiest choice we can make. Protecting your peace is never a selfish act, but rather a necessary step in preserving your own self-worth. Healing from deep wounds takes time, courage, and a strong commitment to your personal well-being. We cannot control how others behave, but we are fully responsible for how we choose to respond to them. It is completely okay to refuse to carry the weight of mistakes that belong entirely to someone else. True kindness means extending compassion to others while also ensuring you do not lose yourself in the process. I hope this journey encourages you to always prioritize your emotional safety and focus on moving forward. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.